You're listening to Podcast Rockstars, the show helping business leaders become podcast legends. Now, here's your host, Dawn Lidwell.
Welcome back to Podcast Rockstars, the show that helps business leaders become podcast legends. I'm your host, Dawn Lidwell, the founder of Lidwell Writing Services, and my guest today is none other than my dear friend, mentor, and client, Kate Astrakhan. Kate is an audio engineer and technical podcast producer with a love for storytelling and audio broadcasts. She is the founder of Podcast Network Solutions, a podcast post-production company that helps podcast networks deliver outstanding audio editing, post-production, and podcast support services to their growing network clients. With over 30 years of experience in the radio and broadcast industry, Kate fell in love with podcasts and their ability to give everyone a voice. Her company currently produces over 1,300 episodes per month. Kate joins me today to share the most effective launch strategies she has seen and helped her podcasting clients implement. She explains why it's critical to launch your show with more than one episode, how many you should launch with, and why you should consider launching with a mix of monologue and interview style episodes. We also discuss how new podcasters can pre-promote their podcast to drive up hype and awareness even before your first episode has been released. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Kate Astrakhan of Podcast Network Solutions. Kate, welcome to Podcast Rockstars.
Hi, Dawn. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into the big topic of today's show, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Oh my gosh, where to begin? Started 900 BC in radio, so about 30 years ago, and worked my way up. Was back when radio was reel to reel, honestly, and we were editing by splicing tape together, and left radio to form my own company that dealt with providing service for radio stations. And we would provide live records, men on the move or not men on the move, but man on the street sort of production. They could call into our ISDN lines, and we handled a lot of live records. We handled a lot of advertising for radio, a lot of advertising post-production for television. And then about 8 years ago-ish, noticing market and that podcasting was really becoming a thing, still very new, but you could see the writing on the wall, much like you could when media started going more online and it was taking the knees out of the print industry. Well, podcasting is kind of doing the same thing to radio, and advertisers are starting to notice that. They're getting more traction in there, and it's now a mainstream advertising platform. So we pivoted away from radio. We do very little radio at this point, and we've pivoted to podcast post-production and video post-production. And here we are today. We work with individual podcasters, and we've branched out into networks.
That is an extensive history, and I always wondered how that all kind of came about with you, because we've worked together for quite some time, but I've always wondered how you pivoted from radio into podcasting.
Monitoring the market, just like we'll be pivoting again from individual podcasters to almost exclusively network, so that the major networks have an additional level of service offering to their clients by whitelisting us. When your revenues begin to decline in a particular area, like they did with the radio productions, you tend to take a really hard look at what's causing that decline. And what was causing that decline is the rise of podcasting.
So then it's true that, I've seen articles that have said that podcasting is basically killing the radio.
It is. Video killed the radio star. Podcasting killed the radio star. If you think about it, advertisers will pay for ad space in, let's say, a morning drive time show on the radio. It's a one-off. It's not evergreen. Now, with podcasting, you can buy ad space in a show and it's evergreen. It's always out there. Now, that product or service offering that they're advertising may become obsolete, but it's still going to drive traffic to that particular advertiser's website for other offerings they might have. So even though that particular ad might expire, the push to their products and services never does. You can't say that with radio.
True. Very true. So what type of services do you offer to networks?
Oh, everything. We have several different product tiers. We have basic, polish your show, which is mastering, leveling, and what we call audio editing. Audio editing is different than content editing. Audio editing is just the coughs and the sneezes and the ums and ahs. We'll take those out. Content editing is editing for the content within the show, the lost trains of thought, the repeated speech, the breaks in the conversation that are just like, oh, well, what do we say next kind of thing. It's editing for content. We offer that as one basic tier, and that's all that tier is. And we have a lot of people take that. And then we have another tier that offers all of what I just said, plus show notes, which is where you come in, because you do all of our show notes and have forever and a day. And then we have another tier that has show notes plus transcripts. And then we have another tier that has all of that plus social media. And then we have another tier that is all of that plus concierge service, which is pre-production help. And this is the ultra mega platinum plus tier, because we help you book guests, we help plan your show, we help do everything, script your show, whatever you need to in pre-production to get your show accomplished. We will do that as well. We have 2 at that level right now. And each client has their own rep, if you will, their own producer that handles everything for them before it gets handed off to the technical end.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we have an arm that offers audio commercials. So if you need a commercial made for your product or service, we have a team of professional voiceover artists, nationally known voiceover artists. We will build your commercial. We do political advertising. So it's going to be fun coming up soon here. We'll get a lot of work with the VO artists and political ads, which is always really hilarious. So we take bets on which one's going to get more traction. And we still do, and we still do live records for radio, but not as much as we used to.
Okay. Gotcha. So, as you know, asking you to be a guest on the show was kind of a no-brainer for me, but figuring out the topic was not.
Right? We struggled with that. Like, what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't know.
Like
what are we going to talk about?
Yeah,
I know, right? It's been like at least 2 months. And I don't think, did we ever decide? I don't think we decided.
Yeah, we decided on launching.
Oh, right. Thank God you write these things down.
If I don't, I would forget.
I know, right? And, like I said, I had to set an Alexa alarm to interview in the books. Oh, so launching. What do you want to know about launching?
First and foremost, let's talk about equipment and what you would recommend for a new podcaster just getting ready to launch. What type of basic equipment would you recommend?
Super simple. Sennheiser microphone, a Behringer Xenix 302 USB, I call it a baby board, cable, boom arm stand, pop filter, a Mac preferably, but I know you have Windows, so you're forgiven. Zoom for recording interviews, and Audacity for recording solo shows. And that's it. You can get a good sounding, inexpensive package all off Amazon, honestly.
Let's talk about launch strategies and driving hype up for a new show. Let's say you're talking to somebody who is fairly new to their industry or perhaps doesn't have a very big following on social media. What type of strategies would you recommend they do to kind of pre-promote the show?
Everything. First of all, set up your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, or as I like to call it, your Insta-Twit face.
I don't think I've ever heard you say that.
So set up your Insta-Twit face and any other social media that you can get yourself out on. What's the other one? Pinterest. You don't underestimate Pinterest. It has huge followings in all kinds of niche industries.
Have you seen really good success with Pinterest? Because I've actually thought about Pinterest, and I know that it is really good for blogs, which, posting the show notes on websites is kind of like posting a blog post on a website. So it kind of makes sense to use Pinterest. But do you see a good conversion rate? We
do. But video posts are huge right now. So doing audiograms or even video posts on Facebook and Instagram using the story function, very big, and basically flooding the market. 8 to 10 posts per platform per day is ideal. And then when your show launches, if you really want to gain serious traction, 25 posts per platform per day. And they could be simple, a quote from the show with a link to that show underneath it. When you get a catalog of, 20 or 30 shows, set them up in Hootsuite to circulate out every day. And then just keep up that pace. And as your catalog grows, the number of posts that you put out grows.
Right. Which also happens to be why we include the quotes in show notes. Exactly.
And the more quotes you have, the more social media posts you have, and the further your reach goes.
Right.
Yeah. So, and promote who you're going to have on the show before you've even recorded your first 10 launch shows. Do a clip. Once you have that guest in place, get a quote from them just in an email. Say, can you give me a quote so I can promote your upcoming interview? And
get a quote. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And just get a quote from them, and you can put that in a social media post. Link it with their name, and then bang. If they're a known quantity in their field and somebody is searching for them, guess what's going to come up? Your upcoming interview.
Right. What other things do you think are critical for a show in pre-launch? Any type of back end work or planning? Like what?
Oh, God. First of all, plan enough time. People really underestimate how much work a good show is. It's the fact is, while everybody can have a podcast, not everybody should have a podcast. People who don't plan for their show appropriately should not have a podcast. I hate to say it so bluntly, but that's just, we've seen it time and time and time again. Oh, I just recorded this while I was in my car because I just don't have time to do this. Well, then stop.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't give it your full attention, if you can't devote the time necessary, then just knock it off. And I totally lost track of what your question was because I chased a rabbit. So time to plan your show is number one. Having a good production calendar where you know what show is launching when, with your titles and your subtitles and your guest name and your guest email. And that's one of the services we provide, is a production calendar that also acts as your index for your back catalog. The other thing that is important is to have all your destinations set up. iTunes, well, now it's Apple Podcasts because, they have to get the word Apple in there everywhere. But Apple Podcast is still the king of the hill, but they're getting some serious competition from places like Pandora and Spotify. Google Play Music is sort of half-heartedly getting into the game. The two to keep your eye on are Spotify and Pandora. But getting those back-end destinations set up and making sure that your show is feeding out to everywhere it can possibly go. And RSS feeds will be aggregated by lots of different smaller platforms, and you don't have to worry about that. It'll get picked up automatically. But getting it into the bigger things, there's approvals now that take a little more time than they used to. Apple has changed its requirements. You have to make sure that you're compliant with that, otherwise they're not going to approve your show. Those are the big ones.
Okay. So, Kate, how many episodes should a new show launch with? What have you found to be successful?
What we've found to be successful is, in an ideal world, is a 10-show launch. If you're dealing in the style of show that is monologue and interview based. And I say 10 because Netflix has done a bad thing to our brains, and we like to listen in bulk. We don't like to wait. And there are 600,000 podcasts, and that number is growing every day. So it's probably way more since I read that statistic a couple of weeks ago. So you don't want to launch with one show. That's like a drop of rain in an ocean. You want to launch with at least 10 so that you start to get that traction. Ignore new and noteworthy. Ignore all the charts. Just ignore all of that for the first 3 months and ignore the charts anyway. But a combination of monologue and interview, 10 shows, 5 monologue, 5 interview. And I say 5 monologue because what you're doing in that first 10 is you're establishing trust with your audience. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you know. They don't know if they should listen to you. And so you need to build that street cred. And those 5 monologues where you share your knowledge, your information, your wisdom, your actionable steps with your audience, that develops that relationship, that develops that trust. And then you further that with the interview guests that you bring on, and you feature them as well. Duration for a monologue, 15 to 20 minutes. That's basically the you want to stick to your point. You want to make your points clearly, and you don't want to waste your listeners' time. So 15 to 20 minutes. For an interview show, 30, max 45 minutes. And I say this because interview shows, both shows, you want to respect your listeners' time. And the typical amount of time for a commute is 30 to 45 minutes. Treadmill time, 30 to 45 minutes. Some people are masochists and stay on the treadmill for an hour. I don't get that. My treadmill personally mocks me from the corner of the room as I eat potato chips, but that's another story for another day. But you want to respect the listener's time. Making dinner, 30 to 45 minutes. This is a passive experience. So you're doing it while you're listening to podcasts while you're doing other things. So those are my recommendations for your launch 10. We've found it to be a very good strategy, a very effective strategy for getting good traction for your show, good subscription rates, good duration of listen. You really want to have that 89 to 95% duration, meaning your listener is listening all the way through your show. They might be dumping out at the outro, but that's a more important metric than downloads. Because it automatically downloads on your device. What I want to see is that people are listening to it and they're listening to it all the way through. And with that format, the 5 interview and the 5 monologue, in those durations, people are listening to the show and they're listening all the way through. And that's the metric that you need to have.
So you said 15 to 20 minutes for monologues. What about, and my show is included here, what about the monologues that are only like 3 to 4 minutes?
That's fine. Those are called sound bites, and those are fantastic.
Okay. So basically you just don't want to go over.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And those 3 to 5 minute ones are great for bonus shows. You get a great thought, something comes across your desk, you're like, oh, I need my people to know this. Grab your mic, blab it out, throw it up. They love those.
Okay, so if you could give an aspiring podcaster one piece of advice before launching their show, because I know we've already talked about so much, but just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Podcasting is a marathon, not a sprint. When you feel like you need to go into pod fade, don't. When you feel like you need to give up, like you don't have another thing to say, like this is not giving you the payoff, you're 30 shows in and you're not seeing anything you're not supposed to. It's a marathon. You're in this for the long haul. You're in this to improve brand awareness. This is a marketing strategy. Your number one sales funnel should be your podcast. You should devote as much time to it as you do to every other marketing strategy to further your business goals, because that's its job. So stay in it for the long haul. It's not a one-off.
Great advice.
Thanks. I wish more people would take it. Too many people think, oh, I'm going to do a 15-minute recording and I'm going to go out and get a sponsor and they're going to pay for my show. It does not work that way. You have to build that trust. You have to build that relationship, and that takes time and it takes effort. It's a marathon.
So let's talk a little bit about sponsors. Do you think it's better for podcasters to find sponsors, or do you think it's better to try promoting their own stuff in order to monetize their show?
I think it depends upon your arena. If you are a podcaster with your own business, the most valuable real estate you have is your listener base and your list. So definitely use that time to promote your own stuff. It's your best sales funnel. If you are speaking to an industry, let's say we have a podcast that deals with aging, midlife, you could easily approach a sponsor like AARP or health insurance, or, those places that sell you burial insurance and let you plan your final expenses, and life insurance companies. So for the lifestyle podcasts, going after those businesses that operate in your niche is a good idea. If you're an entrepreneur promoting your own product and service, then promote your own product and service. Does that make sense?
So basically, it's a matter of who your listeners are and aligning whatever you're promoting with what they would actually want.
See, this is why you write all the good stuff. You use all the best words. You use all the good words to explain stuff, and I go in circles. That's perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think I gotcha. Thank you so much, Kate, for being on Podcast Rockstars. Where can our audience reach out to you?
You can reach out to us on our soon-to-be-launched website, podcastnetworksolutions.com. And you can email us at social media at podcastnetworksolutions.com. And we're on Instagram at podcast_expert is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Kate, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to Podcast Rockstars, sponsored by Lidwell Writing Services, because a great podcast deserves great show notes. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave us a review, and remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join our exclusive Podcast Rockstars Facebook community to connect with other podcasting legends. In the Facebook community, you can ask your most pressing questions and tell us who you would love to hear on the show. And if you're ready to experience the power of great show notes, contact Dawn at lidwellwriting.com.